Friday, the 30th of March. Hello and welcome to Your Business Morning, the final edition of the program for the month and for the first quarter of 2018. I am Boasting Amafaya and welcome everyone to the program. For our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world, it's Easter, a Friday, and most markets are closed around the world, including Broad Street, where we will be seeing a reopening on Tuesday. So that's what we're looking at. But again, we got quite a lot of stories to look at for you as we get the business of the quarter being reviewed all the way down from the 1st of January. We'll continue all of this into next week as we also step into the second quarter of the year. But one of the major announcements by the Buhari's administration was the executive order that was signed on the 29th of June last year regarding a tax amnesty, the first ever in Nigeria's nearly 60-year history, which is declare, pay, and walk. That was what you call the VAIDS, or VAIDS, which is the Voluntary Asset Declaration Scheme, of which the Ministry of Finance and the Federal Inland Revenue Service has been campaigning about. Today is the final day. Now we're seeing the curtain draw down on this very important tax amnesty. The government says there will be no extension. And today, as a public holiday, that means if you hadn't declared by the end of yesterday, you're caught in the web. Let's get this conversation started. Yomi Olugbenro is a partner and West Africa tax leader at Deloitte, Nigeria, and is live in the studio with us this morning to do a very strong wrap and a look back as well as a look forward into what happens as the curtain draws down on VAIDS, what you call the tax amnesty. This is the tax man, and I called him the tax oracle. Good morning.
Good morning, Boasting.
It's good to have you here.
Good morning, happy Easter. It's good to be here.
Thank you, and we appreciate your time dragging you out of bed early on a Friday like this with all the vehicular traffic jam in Lagos yesterday. I'm sure you will need some rest this morning, but we appreciate your time being here. Let's get straight to business. This executive order expires today. So the question is, let's go back a little bit to the rationale behind the VAIDS, or the tax amnesty program, when it was signed into an executive order just about less than a year ago.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for having me, Boasting. So it's 9 months already. The executive order was signed on the 29th of June last year and was meant to run for 9 months. So by the count of 1, 2, 3, yesterday, as the business closes, the curtain, fell as it were. So bearing any last-minute, final address by the government, towards probably reopening for some latecomers. Those who haven't come in by end of business yesterday are already caught in the web, picking your words. But I mean, just like the question you asked, why did we get into the scheme in the first place? We've mentioned it over and over again that the tax penetration in the country is very low. The amount of non-oil tax revenue that the government is making is relatively low compared to our mates, and our peers, in the continent and around the world. And government realizes the enormity of the resources that will be required to go in chase of very large number of people who are not compliant, because this has been on for many years. So government threw open its windows to say, look, if you have any irregularities in the past, this is an opportunity for you to avoid all of the penalties and criminality that is attached to evasion. Come clean, no interest, no penalty. You are immune from prosecution. If you haven't got the money, there's a possibility of spreading the payment over up to 3 years subject to agreement. Your confidentiality is guaranteed, and just come clean and let's expand the database. So government set out to, if you like, increase the number of taxpayers. I think about 4 million new taxpayers was being targeted. About $1 million was being targeted in revenue, and 9 months is gone already. So we need to evaluate.
If I declare as a corporate or as an individual and I don't have the cash on the table or in my pocket to pay, part of the VAIDS agreement is that I can spread the payment over a period of 3 years.
That's correct. So government actually did say, subject to discussion and agreement with the various tax authorities, you don't need to cough out all of the money at once. You have the opportunity to negotiate over up to 36 months. The amount of money that will be agreed will be subject to maybe the veracity of the issue and the amount in question. But you have at least on paper up to 3 months you could negotiate for payment of the liability.
Those were some of the details that we were just getting to know as some of this keep hearing. But let's bring this up to the screen. And thanks for bringing this for us to explain the road to today, where the curtain now falls on the tax amnesty program. Explain this to us. Those hanging fruits, some in green, some in blue, and I love the green ones.
Well, essentially, this just captures the entire scheme. The launch date was it was signed on 29th of June, and it became effective from 1st of July and ran through till 31st of March. So, who are the people covered? Every category of taxpayer. So whether you're a corporate, whether you are individual, whether you are a non-resident taxpayer that has liability in the country, you're covered. And what taxes are covered? All type of taxes, whether it's corporate taxes, whether it's indirect taxes, whether it's income related, all taxes are covered. The immediate past 6 years, 2011 to 2016, is all covered. So if you have any tax type, any type of taxpayer for the past 6 years, you have an opportunity, to take advantage of that. And it shows what the benefits are: immunity from audit, immunity from your interest is waived, penalty is waived. You have opportunity to spread it, and the time frame. The time frame is 9 months, like we did mention, and it covered all category of all tax authorities. So whether the taxes is payable to state tax authorities, whether it's payable to the federal, so just about every element of tax obligation in the country. And the scheme also did indicate that if you fail to take advantage of this opportunity, then the government will go all out to implement the law the way it is, i.e., the penalties will go back to be applicable, interest will become applicable, the tax audit, investigation, and prosecution for criminality, which essentially is what it is. If you fail to pay your taxes as at when due, or you probably hide your income, there's some element of criminality that can be established against you. So that's essentially what the scheme covers, and there's a memorandum of understanding that the federal government signed with all the 36 state tax authority to make this a national project. So it's not just a federal tax, and that's why taxpayers go to the federal if their obligation is to the federal tax authority. They go to the various state tax authority if their obligation is to the states. So this is a national assignment. It is a national assignment. So it's signed at the federal level because our legislations are federal. The Personal Income Tax Act is one legislation, but it's been administered by all the states across the country.
This is about declare, pay, and walk away. And we've gone over this enough times. But the question is, why did this tax amnesty covered just between 2011 to 2016? Do you have any idea? And that brings us to that, the third hanging fruit there. The years covered is just 6 years. Why was it? Why was it not extended all the way back? Why 2011 to 2016? Well,
there are a lot of practical and legal issue that's associated with tax open years. So in our tax laws, there's what we call the statute of limitation, or the number of years for which tax authorities could legally come back at you to say you need to make good any default. Ordinarily speaking, that covered the immediate past 6 years. Unless and until a case of deliberate default or willful default, which then get into the realm of pure legal matter, criminal offense. So that's the only time when the revenue authorities come at you to say we're doing an investigation and therefore we're going beyond the 6 years. So in the first course, the number of years that are open for audit is typically 6 years. So my view is that government probably tried to avoid the controversies that could be connected with opening more than 6 years, because a number of taxpayers could come forward to say, look, based on the law, unless and until you have established that have committed a criminal offense, you can't go beyond the immediate 6 years. So that's one on the legal side. But also, practically speaking, record retention period by companies and by corporates also are governed by statute. So for how long can you continue to keep your records? and just wait indefinitely for revenue authorities and tax authorities to come back at you. So if the tax authorities wake up one day and say, we want to audit you for the past 12 years, and you could go back to the law to say, statutorily, I'm only expected to keep my books for this number of years. So there could be some dragging back and forth. And maybe just finally, the government just realizes that, look, you have been defaulting for many years, but let's draw a line. All right, on the time, and just say between those time, make good of whatever areas you've had, and then going forward, you can continue to do the right thing. You can continue to go and sin no more. Yep. That feels good. But how much has been achieved? In the news, what we've gathered is that it's just about 20 billion out of $1 billion. That still looks to me like a drop in the ocean. Well, that's what we read on the papers. But I can tell you for a fact that that number can be anything close to reality. Judging by the last-minute mentality of Nigerians, the number of applications that I have to deal with, for example, for my client in the last 1 week, probably exceed all that I dealt with in the entire month of March. And the number of applications I treated in March is probably more than all of the prior 8 months. So the exercise probably didn't pick up until the later part of 2017, towards December and November. That's when the campaign and the sensitization and the public campaigns actually picked up. The first 3 or 4 months, I think the government were trying to do the drawing, trying to make sure that the rules are in place. They're contacting the revenue authorities, setting up the structures, and just a little of it is known outside of the big professional firms that are probably supporting the government on this case. So, but when we got to November and December, we started seeing some of our going around with the minister, with the Federal Inland Revenue Services chairman and all of the state chairmen. The road shows and the road shows started. And by the time we crossed over from December to January, tax had become a trending word. We started having... Meaning that folks now begin to take Kemi Adeosun and Fowler more seriously, and it looks like there is no turning back. That's correct. So, because we can't leave the fact that there was a lot of trust issue that is associated with any scheme, that is launched by the country. Taxpayer want to sit back and just observe, is this real? Is the intention genuine? Will it happen? Will it happen? Do they have the willpower to go all out? So if I don't go, can I really be found out? And until some of those details started getting into the public and people started receiving love letters. I got it. Yeah. I got it. And I think you got one of those letters, right? No, I didn't. I checked my mail, but since I don't use a P.O. box or PMB anymore, I wish that would come in my email. But I'm still checking. I'm still checking if I got. But I didn't get from those thousands of people. But I think, perhaps, what do you think really got folks running to you and to other firms, big and small, federal, state level, to say, look, I want to declare, is it that the Nigerian authorities have been able to sign some documents with certain countries, like Mauritius, for example, and others, and then with the UK as well, and then they've gotten everybody's BVN right now. So I'm sure the finance minister will have an idea how much I have in my bank account. So if the VAIDS guys want to come after someone like me, I will say, well, both we have your VAIDS, we have your land registry, whatever, so we can just go after you. Right. So do you think folks are scared? I think they are, and rightly so. A lot of things were happening all around us. Globally, we see Nigeria, strengthening its ties with different authorities around the world. The automatic exchange of information kicked in. The UK tightened its rule. The unexplained word order, became implemented. Effective 1st of January. The Project Lighthouse that the federal government is doing, which is data mining, merging BVN with CAC record and all of that, and all of a sudden. Some of the high and mighty who thought they were completely hidden started receiving love letters to say, look, we've checked through your record. We can't see you on our dashboard. You're sitting on 10, 20 board of directors of companies, and you declare just one.
Hypothetically.
That's right.
So the CAC unmasks those who have been hiding.
Absolutely.
Let's examine a few of the issues here.
Right.
And where we stop has to do with why folks suddenly, at the last minute, started coming up from under the rug, and everybody says, hey, hold on a second. Yomi, I need to let you take a look at this because I don't want to get caught in the web of this March 30th deadline. So, but what are the key issues here in Nigeria's tax system that makes tax a very naughty issue to untie, as it were?
Right. So it's a whole lot of interconnected issue, and you can't isolate the challenges with taxation in Nigeria from the overall business environment, or in fact living in the country. So we're battling with a whole lot of as a developing economy, we're battling with a whole lot of issues. Infrastructure, capacity, knowledge, and the ease with which we could run through policies that other nations run through quite easily. So the VAIDS scheme is a very brave attempt by trying to make the best out of the challenging situation that we find ourselves. So I think Bill Gates, that visited us a couple of days ago, put it in a very nice way. It's the tax system is at a low equilibrium. The tax penetration is low, but it's also because people also receive some low level of service. So there's a challenges with doing business, there's a challenges with paying taxes, there's a challenge with, the earning power of the people. And so in a way, there's a lot of handshake with the amount of taxes they could pay. If we isolate the few, and mighty who ideally should be doing much more than that. So, and that's what the government did. So whether or not this VAID is extended, I personally will plead with the government to say we should listen to the plea of the business community and the taxpayer to consider an extension. I know that government will probably have resisted the urge to extend, because if you do that, folks in the country will probably have gone back and wait till the very last minute again. But adding maybe like an extra 3 months won't do any bad to the country. So let's roll it forward a little for 3 more months, and let's have one full year, and that will coincide with the 30th of June, which is the filing deadline for many of the corporates. So they still have an opportunity to regularize their tax returns. So that would be my ask, on one side. So, but beyond that, even when that is done, that won't solve all of our problems. So we need to go back, to fixing the fundamental tax issues. We have problems with the outdated legislation that we're operating with, for example, 1979 Act, 1993 Act. In a modern economy, in a modern business, is not appropriate. We need to sit up, and do the right thing. We need to fix the issue of multiplicity of taxes and levies that people talk about. So there's a whole lot of things that we need to do, in moving forward.
Let's come back to the VAIDS and the tax amnesty. And I sat down in the panel listening to the Ghanaian finance minister,
right,
on Tuesday in Abidjan, and he was speaking about how the Ghanaian authorities are approaching something close to copying this tax amnesty.
It's actually been copied. So 1st of January this year, a similar tax amnesty scheme rolled out in Ghana. So it's going to be on until 30th of September of this year. Exactly the same kind of scheme. 9 months. The same kind of scheme that Nigeria currently runs.
When the finance minister was saying, look, the tax penetration, 16%, tax to GDP, 16%. They're looking at 25%. And they look at the numbers. And he spoke about the numbers for corporates and individuals. And you can't believe it, that in a country of about 40 million people, the tax penetration is just absolutely near the bottom.
Yeah.
So a tax amnesty, you think we should spread this? So I'm asking whether we should do other form of revenue-based amnesty. Is it necessary?
Every means and ways by which we can deepen the tax penetration is welcome. even if we achieve the target of adding 4 million extra taxpayers to the existing 14 million or thereabout, we'll still be below 20 million taxpayers out of potentially 70 million people based on the statistics that we read. So it's still low. So every ways and means by which we could open it up and spread the burden over a large number of people, it will be a welcome idea. My take is that even with the amount of information that is available to the government, let's take it as a given that now the government have access to everybody's data, they have access to your earnings and all of that. What is the amount of resources in terms of manpower and capability and technology that is available for government to go in chase of 50 million potential taxpayers? That's a humongous responsibility. So let's open it up a little more. This is a peculiar economy. This is a peculiar situation where even though it is unjustifiable, people have very valid reasons why they still feel angry at dropping in their money, even though the law says they should, and I'm not in any way condoling it, but they still have very serious reasons to say, why are you going to ask me to pay tax? I practically run a local government of my own. It could be a vicious cycle. It could be a chicken and an egg thing. I fix my road, I fix my electricity, I fix my power, and that's what I've done in the past. So what is the moral right for government to ask me to put in the money? Because what has been there before, I need to be a lot more convinced, and I'm talking of a national spread. A few states are doing better than the other.
A reversal of what John F. Kennedy says. Don't think of what your country can do, but what you can do for your country. So people in Nigeria feels, well, I'm doing so much that the government should be doing. What is the government doing for me?
That's correct. That's the argument. And of course, if you listen to the government, they say that's exactly why you need to do the right thing. So we have all of the money to make all these amenities available and all of that. So, and that's why there needs to be a middle ground. You know, government needs to realize that as unacceptable as those explanations or arguments are
in law,
morally, but from a practical perspective, the system hasn't been fair to everybody in the past. This is since 1960 till date, so we can't justifiably say the system has been fair to everybody, and we must recognize that, and that's why this kind of an amnesty provides some bit of a middle ground. So we know you may not be right in law, but we also know that in the past you may not have been fairly treated. So let's find a middle ground. Let's draw a line. Let's understand, and I think that's what the finance minister, if you listen to her a couple of months, a couple of weeks ago, you keep hearing how she explains how unfair, you know, the system is in terms of the large and the high and mighty who are earning so much, paying so little, and just the guys who are on paid employment, whose salaries are being withheld, you know, so those are the people that are being asked to pay taxes. So let's put in all those kind of sentiments. Let's buy people's emotional and psychologically, you know, into the scheme.
That is part of this conversation because, and that is what you call the tax and the Nigerian economy. If an economy is failing, yeah. If well, way back last year, 27 state governments out of 36 were not paying salaries adequately. So if you have state governments not paying salaries, how do you ask these individuals for tax? Because if they're not paid salaries as civil servants, you can't deduct the payee from it, right?
That's correct.
But you still, whatever they consume, you still deduct the VAT.
That's correct. That's correct.
Help me out here.
Yeah. So because one is based on income, the other is based on consumption. So if you haven't earned any income, there's no salary. You either spending from what you've got before, or maybe you have some other means that is not that is separate from your paid employment. So as you buy, as you transact, there are some element of taxes that you pay, and that's why, I mean, people like me, I'm a proponent of an indirect system. You know, it's a lot easier, it's a lot more convenient. So people, in an economy where you still need all of the money to reflect the economy, I think it's a better tax system to have a lower direct taxes, so the purchasing power, the disposable income of be it the corporate or individual is increased, and there is a feel-good effect. So you earn 100, instead of paying 20 to the government, maybe for the sake of argument, government takes just 15 or government takes just 10. And so you think your disposable income has been increased by 5 or 10. But bet what? For every 1 naira Nigerian earns, statistics says 70 kobo is spent. So the propensity to consume It's about 0.7. So the whole of that money ended up being spent anyway, so, and as you spend, there is an amount of tax, VAT or whatever form of indirect tax we want to introduce that is paid to the government. And you probably didn't know. You probably didn't know you're paying those taxes. Just walk into the shop and know that for a 100 naira item, somebody gave you a bill of 105 and you paid and you move on. But if somebody asks you to pay 5 naira tax from your 100 naira income, you're going to grumble.
How does it work in developed economies when there's a tax law that says we're giving more back to the people, we're taxing the high and mighty, and we're putting more money in the pockets of the workers, as it were? How does it work out in those places, and what makes it almost impossible to achieve in this environment?
It's because in systems like that, decisions are fact-based. Decisions are well researched. You have amount of information with which you know that by increasing this by 0.7 or 100 basis point or 1 basis point, you can almost immediately see the impact. You can appeal to people's emotion. You can let people have the feel-good effect, so we're reducing the direct tax and people think, the taxes are lowered. But the government, on the other hand, is going to be making those money either through employment, either through increased business activity, either through indirect taxes. Those are the kind of things that is done in those countries. And the ease with which those legislations and policies are passed, it's incredible. But in our own environment, to pass a small amendment takes, a considerable longer period of time. So we have challenges with data, which have challenges with, how well we've embraced technology. We have challenges with how well, the polity works in terms of making sure that our policies are easily understood and the support you need at the executive and legislative are all there. So there are a whole lot of things that are involved.
And communicating it with the people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The World Bank gave us this story about what you call communication in a highly impoverished environment. I remember Dr. Obodet from the World Bank. That was about 24 years ago, part of our training. Well, a final one.
Yep.
This VAIDS comes at a cost. Do you have any idea how much it costs Buhari's administration to prosecute this amnesty? Because an amnesty means you put something on the table to get something in your pocket.
That's correct.
As some folks are saying, the cost of the publicity, the cost of the advertisement, the cost of getting consultants like yourself is quite huge.
But it's a little bit too early to be able to do a very fair assessment of the entire cost. Like I said, up until 8 p.m. yesterday, folks were still queuing up in front of tax authorities. Many VAIDS offices officials at VAIDS offices probably didn't get home until probably 9 or 8 p.m. yesterday. So
like in your firm?
Like also with tax authorities, particularly those who are actually receiving the form on the side of the government. So because people tried to battle through the traffic that we had yesterday, people didn't get submit on time, and the queue was just unusual compared to what we had before. So whatever number you see being brandished in the news now, I think it's still going to be a guesswork. The proportion of submission yesterday relative to the other is so high. So we need to allow some time, maybe 1-2 more weeks if there's no extension, to be able to then do a quantification of what is the potential interest that was lost, penalty that was waived, how much is spent on publicity, how much is spent on consultancy and all of that.
I got it. I'm not too sure if we will have, and this is playing to your side of the field, how much we can really get the full picture, since there was an extension, there is a 3-year installment period for pay. So we can't really tell if a guy puts, if a firm puts 10 million or $1 billion on the table, what they will pay spread over the next 3 years.
That's correct, but at least we can have an idea of the total amount that has been so declared. Yes. How much has now come in terms of actual cash payment is probably what we can't tell until the full installment cycle is over.
So whether the cutting falls today or not is still ongoing. It's still ongoing. In one way or the other.
Absolutely.
In terms of processing and what have you.
That's correct. Those who've gotten approvals are still making payments, and for the next 3 years possibly,
money is still coming in.
Money is still coming in from Amnesty.
Very interesting. Yeah, we'll keep tracking the money. Thank you very much. And do enjoy the rest of your day and your holiday.
Thank you so much, both.
Yomi Olugbenro, who is a partner and West Africa tax leader at Deloitte, Nigeria.